It was an ordinary afternoon. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban neighborhood. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance as the protagonist, a middle-aged homeowner named Alex, returned from a trip to the grocery store. He was ready for a peaceful evening. Maybe a cup of tea, some quiet reading. But when he opened the mailbox, his eyes immediately locked onto something that didn't belong. A thick, official-looking envelope from the Homeowners Association, HOA. Its bold letters stamped across the front. Important legal matter. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had always kept to himself, kept his lawn tidy, followed every rule the HOA set. And yet, for reasons he couldn't quite place, the envelope felt like an omen. With a mix of curiosity and dread, Alex slid the letter from the box and walked back toward his front door. His fingers trembled as he ripped open the envelope, unsure of what he might find inside. He had heard rumors about the HOA being harsh, how they'd fine neighbors for the smallest of infractions, but he had never imagined they would come after him. He wasn't exactly a rule breaker, was he? Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. It was formal, cold, and almost too neat. At first glance, it seemed straightforward. That's when his stomach dropped. $50,000 fine. Immediate payment required. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Alex's eyes skimmed the rest of the letter, which outlined vague accusations, unsanctioned property alterations, disregard for community standards, and a list of violations that sounded almost like a joke. There were no specific details, no clear evidence, just a demand for an absurdly large sum of money. Confusion swept over him. He was careful. He had made sure every renovation was approved. Every fence was within guidelines. So how had this happened? Had someone complained about something he hadn't even noticed? Was this just a mistake? But no, the letter was clear. This was real, and it was official. Alex stared at the fine for what felt like hours, his mind racing. $50,000. Half of that amount could pay off the mortgage. The thought of losing his home, of dealing with this mountain of debt, made his stomach twist in knots. Something didn't feel right, though. As he looked closer at the letter, he noticed a subtle detail that gnawed at the back of his mind. The HOA had mentioned a penalty for alterations to common areas, but there was no mention of specifics about where or what the alterations were. In fact, there was no mention of anything about the road. He stopped mid-thought. The road. The one road that led in and out of the neighborhood. Alex's eyes widened in realization. He had bought that road years ago when it had come up for sale. The HOA had no idea about that. No one did. It was a forgotten detail, something buried in the paperwork, a mere formality when he bought the property. But in that moment, he understood. The HOA had just dropped a bombshell. But they didn't know what he knew. Suddenly, Alex wasn't just a victim. He had power. The knowledge crashed into him like a tidal wave, filling him with an unsettling mixture of fear and exhilaration. Could this be the leverage he needed to take back control? But that brought more questions. Was this a mistake? Or was it something far more sinister? Was the HOA testing him, pushing him to see how far they could go? A bitter thought settled in Alex's chest. If the HOA was wrong about this, how far would they go to cover up their mistake? Alex's mind raced. The clock was ticking. His life, his home, everything was about to change. And he had no idea how far the HOA would push him before they realized they were up against something much bigger than a simple homeowner. Something much, much more dangerous. Alex sat at his kitchen table, staring at the letter. The $50,000 fine gleamed like a warning in his hands. His pulse quickened with each passing moment as he replayed the details in his mind. What had he done wrong? He couldn't recall any property alterations that would warrant such an astronomical fine. His home was pristine, his yard well kept. He hadn't even been involved in any neighborhood disputes. But this fine, this demand, felt too calculated, too deliberate to be a simple mistake. His thoughts shifted to the HOA. They had always been a thorn in the side of the neighborhood, micromanaging every lawn, every mailbox, and every decorative flower pot. It was their way or the highway. But Alex, despite his occasional frustration with their petty rules, had always complied. He'd never challenged them, never caused trouble. He had always believed that if he kept his head down, they would leave him alone. But now this, a fine that could destroy his finances, a fine that felt far more personal than any of the previous HOA notices. As Alex sat there, the faintest memory tugged at him. A conversation from years ago, when he purchased his property. The realtor had mentioned something in passing. The land across the road's going to be up for sale soon. It's just a strip of land, but it could come in handy. At the time, Alex hadn't thought much about it. The land was nothing but a narrow stretch of dirt, part of the access road that led in and out of the neighborhood. It wasn't marked on any maps, and the HOA had never paid it much attention. He bought it out of curiosity, as a small investment. It seemed harmless enough. But now, sitting in his kitchen, the full weight of that decision hit him. Alex owned the road, the only road in and out of the neighborhood. His heart raced. The HOA had no idea. They thought they controlled the neighborhood, but they were wrong. The power they thought they held over him, over the other residents, was all a lie. Alex had the keys to everything. He could cut off access to the entire community with one simple decision. But that was the problem. The HOA wasn't a group of helpless, clueless amateurs. They were powerful, ruthless, and they had a history of using every legal loophole to get what they wanted. He had read stories of neighbors who had tried to fight back, only to have their homes foreclosed or their lives dragged through endless litigation. Alex was no fool. He knew this wasn't going to be as easy as sending a letter and waiting for them to back down. Could he even trust that this fine was a mistake? Or was the HOA testing him, pushing him to see how far they could go? And if they were, what would their next move be when they realized the truth? He shuddered at the thought. The fine was just the beginning. He could feel it in his bones. The HOA wasn't going to let this go without a fight. But Alex had a card to play. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this fine, this confrontation, was exactly what he needed. This was his chance to take control, to expose the HOA for what they really were. He could do it, but he had to be careful. He had to move smart, make no mistakes. His fingers drummed on the table, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The clock was ticking, and Alex knew that once he made his move, there was no turning back. Would he take the risk, or would he let this chance slip through his fingers? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but deep down, he knew there was no going back. He was about to change the rules of the game. The next few hours felt like an eternity. Alex paced back and forth across his living room, mind racing with possibilities. The fine, the road, the HOA, they were all pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about property violations anymore. This was about power. And Alex knew he had more than he'd first realized. As night fell, the weight of the decision settled in. He could already feel the pressure building. The pressure of holding a secret weapon that could either protect him or destroy him. What would the HOA do if they realized he owned the only access road in and out of the entire neighborhood? Would they back off, thinking him too powerful to challenge? Or would they double down, trying to crush him with legal tactics they used against others before? His mind turned over every possible scenario. In the worst case, they could try to drive him into a corner with lawsuits, escalating things until his life was consumed with endless court dates. Alex knew firsthand how ruthless the HOA could be. Neighbors had been dragged through months of legal battles for the smallest infractions, and some had even lost their homes when they couldn't pay fines or fees. The HOA was a well-oiled machine, fueled by power, and they had no qualms about destroying lives to protect their authority. But the more Alex thought about it, the more he realized that this fine might not have been a mistake at all. What if the HOA knew exactly what they were doing? What if this fine was their way of testing him, seeing how far they could push before he snapped? The thought sent a chill down his spine. What if they already knew about the road? What if they had known all along but had decided to let him think it was his secret advantage? They might be waiting for the moment he would reveal his hand. The more Alex considered this, the more he felt as if he were playing a game with far higher stakes than he had ever imagined. He couldn't just sit idly by and hope it would blow over. The HOA would never let that happen. He had to act, swiftly and decisively. But he had to be careful. If he made the wrong move, he might find himself facing an enemy far more powerful than a simple homeowners association. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat. Was it them? Had the HOA already come to confront him? The timing felt too coincidental. He hesitated for a moment, heart pounding in his chest. Should he answer, or pretend he wasn't home? The knock came again, louder this time, almost insistent. Alex swallowed hard and walked toward the door. As he reached for the handle, a thought flashed across his mind. What if it wasn't the HOA at all? He opened the door cautiously, and standing on the other side was his neighbor, Jessica. She looked both nervous and apologetic, her hands wringing together as she glanced at him. "Hey, Alex," she said, her voice tense. I just got the same letter. The HOA sent me a fine too. I'm not sure what's going on, but it's bad. They said I have to pay $10,000 for some kind of violation. Have you seen this?" Alex's stomach churned. This wasn't just about him. The HOA was hitting other homeowners too. It wasn't a mistake. It was a coordinated attack. They were targeting everyone, ramping up their power play to make an example of the neighborhood. They'd gone too far. Alex muttered, more to himself than to Jessica. His grip tightened on the doorframe, the weight of everything crashing down on him in that moment. He wasn't alone in this. The HOA had unleashed something that was beyond just a personal vendetta. It was a war, and it was spreading. "Alex, what are we going to do?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you think they want? What's going on?" Alex locked eyes with her, the resolve settling in his chest. He wasn't going to let the HOA tear apart his life, or anyone else's, for that matter. He couldn't let them win. With a steady breath, he spoke, his voice low but fierce. "I think it's time we show them we're not afraid." The moment those words left his lips, the true danger of the situation hit him. This wasn't just about surviving the HOA's attacks. It was about taking control. And he knew, without a doubt, that the HOA would not go down without a fight. But now, the stakes had changed. They had just underestimated the one thing they never saw coming. And Alex was ready to make them regret it. Alex closed the door behind Jessica, his mind racing. The weight of the situation settled deeper into his bones, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. The HOA wasn't just targeting him. They were attacking the entire neighborhood. And if Alex didn't act fast, they would continue to tighten their grip. He could already feel the cold tendrils of their power reaching into every corner of the community. He paced the floor, trying to steady his breathing. The knowledge of the road, the piece of land no one knew he owned, now felt more like a ticking time bomb. If the HOA found out, they might retaliate in ways he couldn't even predict. It wasn't just about a fine anymore. It was about power, about showing who had control over this neighborhood. But Alex couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were testing him. Maybe, just maybe, they knew about the road all along. Maybe they were daring him to strike first. He glanced over at Jessica, still standing awkwardly by the door. She was nervous, her eyes wide with uncertainty, and Alex knew she wasn't the only one feeling this pressure. The HOA's reach extended far beyond just his property. He had to make a move, and he had to make it now, before this spiraled completely out of control. "Jessica," Alex said, his voice low and steady, "we need to make them realize we're not the ones they want to mess with." Her brow furrowed. "How?" We can't just stop paying and hope it goes away. They'll come for us, Alex. They always do. I know, he replied. But we're not going to back down. We need to send them a message, a clear one. He paused, his mind working through the possibilities. If he was going to play this game, he had to be strategic. He couldn't just make an impulsive move. It had to be calculated. Alex, what are you thinking? Jessica asked, stepping closer. She looked worried, but her voice carried a sense of determination. She was already in this with him, whether she liked it or not. The HOA's reach had already spread too far. I own the road, Alex said, his voice calm, almost eerie in its certainty. And I don't think they realize the power I have. Jessica blinked. Wait, you mean, you own the road? Alex nodded. The only road that leads in and out of this neighborhood. If I block it, the entire community is stuck. No one can get in, no one can get out. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth slightly agape. But that's insane. You can't. I can. Alex interrupted, his tone hardening. And I'm thinking it's time to use that leverage. If the HOA thinks they can push us around, they're wrong. They're pushing too far, and it's time we made them regret it. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he considered the consequences. If he followed through, the HOA would have no choice but to back down. They would have to. No one would be able to reach the community without his say-so. But that wasn't without risks. The HOA could take him to court, could drag him through years of legal hell, and there was no guarantee that a judge would side with him. If things went wrong, it could destroy him. But if he didn't act now, they would destroy him anyway. Jessica looked at him, as though searching for any hint of doubt, but she found none. What do you want me to do? Alex's gaze locked with hers, his resolve hardening like steel. We're going to send them a letter. We'll let them know what I know. And if they want to keep pushing this fine, they'll have to go through me. But it won't be just about me anymore. I'll bring the whole neighborhood into this. We'll make it clear that we're not their pawns. Jessica hesitated, but only for a moment. All right, she said finally. Let's do it. Alex felt the air shift around them as the gravity of their decision settled in. This wasn't just about standing up for himself anymore. It was about challenging an institution that had held this community under its thumb for far too long. He was ready for war. But as he reached for the pen to begin drafting the letter, a dark thought crossed his mind. What if the HOA had been waiting for this? What if this was all part of their plan? The answer would come soon enough. But Alex wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The stakes had just been raised. And for the first time in a long time, Alex was ready to play the game. The night stretched on, but Alex couldn't sleep. The decision was made. He had committed himself to a path that would alter the course of his life. And yet, the silence of the dark house felt suffocating. He sat at his kitchen table, the faint glow of the lamp casting long shadows over the letter he was preparing to send. His hand hovered over the paper, thoughts swirling in his mind. Would they retaliate immediately? Or would they try to negotiate, pretending this was just a simple misunderstanding? Either way, Alex knew he had set the wheels in motion. His move had been made, and now there was no turning back. The letter was simple but powerful, direct without leaving any room for misinterpretation. He addressed the HOA with a cold, calculated tone, outlining the fine and making it crystal clear that any further attempts to impose it would result in the complete shutdown of the road, cutting off all access to the community. He didn't give them a choice. The road, his road, was now the key to everything. If they wanted to push him, they would have to deal with the consequences. Alex could feel the weight of his words as they left his pen. He folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. It was as though the paper itself had become the boundary between his old life and the new dangerous path he was about to walk. When he stood, his legs felt stiff, like he was carrying a heavy burden on his shoulders. The moment of confrontation was drawing near, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of adrenaline. Just as he was about to head to the door, the phone rang. Alex froze. He didn't recognize the number. His first instinct was to ignore it, but something held him there. He picked up the phone, his hand shaking slightly. "Hello, Mr. Evans." The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and almost too calm. "This is Paul Reynolds from the HOA board. We received your letter." Alex's pulse quickened. This was it. The first move in a game that could unravel everything. "I see," Alex replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "And what's the HOA's response?" There was a long pause. "We find your actions concerning. We understand your position, but we must remind you that the HOA has full legal authority over the community's property and any decisions regarding access to it. The road is a common area, and your claim of ownership is problematic." A tight knot formed in Alex's stomach. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but hearing it from the HOA directly made the gravity of the situation even clearer. They were digging in their heels. "And if I don't comply?" Alex asked, his voice cold. "We will take appropriate legal action," Paul Reynolds said smoothly, as if the words were rehearsed. "We trust you understand the ramifications." Alex felt the weight of the threat hanging in the air, suffocating him. But he wasn't intimidated. He knew exactly what was at stake. "I understand," Alex replied, his voice unwavering. "But you seem to forget, Mr. Reynolds. I control the only way in or out of this neighborhood. So the real question is, do you understand the ramifications?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by an unsettling silence. Alex knew he had caught them off guard. The moment of surprise had passed. "Mr. Evans," Reynolds said, his tone suddenly colder, "you're making a mistake. I hope you're prepared to deal with the consequences." "I'm not making a mistake," Alex shot back. "You are. And you'll regret underestimating me." The line went dead. Alex stared at the phone, the air in the room thick with tension. His heart hammered in his chest. He had just made his first move in a high-stakes game with an opponent far more dangerous than he had imagined. But now, he wasn't just defending his property. He was setting the stage for something bigger. The HOA had thrown the first punch, but Alex was done running. As he stood there, staring at the phone, the realization hit him. This wasn't going to be over quickly. This would be a battle of wills. And he had just entered the arena. The following days were a strange mix of silence and anticipation. Alex hadn't heard from the HOA since the phone call, and the neighborhood around him seemed eerily calm. The usual hum of suburban life, the sound of lawnmowers, kids playing, neighbors chatting, carried on as if nothing had changed. But Alex knew better. The quiet was just a temporary lull before the storm. Each morning, he woke with a tight knot in his stomach, expecting some sign of the HOA's retaliation. Every time the phone rang, his heart skipped a beat, and every knock on the door made his pulse race. But each time, it was a call from a telemarketer or a neighbor asking for a cup of sugar. Nothing from the HOA. Nothing to signal what was coming. Alex had spent the days preparing. He studied every legal document he could find regarding property rights, HOA regulations, and the neighborhood's zoning laws. He called a lawyer for advice, though he was careful not to reveal too much. He needed to be ready for any eventuality, especially when the HOA inevitably came at him with everything they had. He knew they wouldn't back down. They'd go for the jugular. But as the days passed, an unsettling thought began to gnaw at him. What if they weren't going to strike at all? What if the HOA's silence meant something more? He had thought they would be enraged, charging at him with lawyers and threats. But this silence, it felt different. Then, on the fourth day after sending the letter, it came. Alex was in his living room, scrolling through some property law books when he heard it. The unmistakable sound of a heavy truck engine rumbling down the street. His eyes snapped to the window. The black SUV with tinted windows was slowly approaching, its engine growling with authority as it crawled past his house. Alex's heart skipped. Was this it? Was the HOA finally making their move? The truck stopped right in front of his house. The engine cut, and a figure stepped out, a tall man in a sharp suit, holding a briefcase. His face was unreadable, but his posture exuded the kind of confidence that only came from dealing with people who had something to hide. Alex's instincts flared. This wasn't just an ordinary visit. He grabbed his jacket and rushed outside, stepping onto the porch as the suited man made his way toward him. "Mr. Evans," the man said, his voice smooth and rehearsed, yet carrying a weight of menace. "I'm Edward Thompson. I represent the HOA." Alex's heart beat harder. This was the moment. "Can I help you, Mr. Thompson?" Alex replied, forcing his voice to remain steady, even as the tension in the air was nearly suffocating. Thompson gave a polite but tight smile. "We've reviewed your letter, Mr. Evans, and we're here to discuss the situation in person. You've made quite the statement." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Alex knew immediately that this was no ordinary negotiation. Thompson wasn't here to discuss. He was here to intimidate. "What exactly are you implying?" Alex asked, his tone deliberately cool. Thompson's eyes flickered over the front of the house, as though taking in every detail, every move Alex made. "I'm implying that you've made a very bold move. A move that could have serious consequences for you, your neighbors, and your community." The weight of his words pressed down on Alex like a stone. He could feel the pressure mounting. Thompson wasn't here just to talk. This was war. Alex crossed his arms, standing firm. "I think it's you who need to realize the consequences, Mr. Thompson. I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." Thompson's smile didn't falter, but Alex could see the flicker of irritation behind his eyes. "Mr. Evans," he said in a low, almost amused tone, "you've made your point, but let's not pretend this is a game. The HOA has resources, legal resources, that you can't even begin to comprehend." "And yet," Alex replied, his voice sharpening with a quiet intensity, "I own the only road in and out of this neighborhood. So what happens when the people here decide they've had enough?" For a moment, there was no sound. The air hung thick between them, charged with tension. Then Thompson took a step forward, his smile now replaced with something darker, something far colder. "You've made a mistake, Mr. Evans," he said softly, "and it will be the last mistake you make." The words were a threat, clear and deliberate, but there was something else in Thompson's eyes now. Something Alex couldn't quite place, a flicker of uncertainty, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the HOA wasn't as invincible as they liked to believe. Alex stood his ground, but inside, a quiet alarm went off. He had crossed a line, and the danger was real now. This wasn't just about a fine or a piece of land. This was personal. And for the first time, Alex realized just how much power the HOA could wield. Alex watched as Thompson's figure retreated back toward the SUV, each step measured and deliberate. The suit-clad man's words echoed in his mind. "The last mistake you make." That ominous phrase lingered, buzzing in the air like an electric current. It felt like the calm before a violent storm, and Alex could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. He stood frozen for a moment, watching the black SUV pull away from the curve and disappear down the street. The neighborhood seemed quiet, still, but the tension in the air had shifted. Something had changed, and Alex could feel it in his gut. Thompson's visit wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge, a test of wills. And Alex had passed it, barely, but the next move was critical. With a deep breath, Alex turned back toward his house. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out with a sense of dread. The screen read, "Unknown number." Without thinking, he answered. "Mr. Evans," came the voice on the other end, smooth and cold. "Paul Reynolds. I trust you had a pleasant conversation with Mr. Thompson." Cut the small talk, Alex replied, his voice tight with tension. What's next? Next? Reynolds repeated, almost mockingly. Next, Mr. Evans, is a reality check. You've poked the hornet's nest, and now you'll face the consequences. Do you honestly believe you can stand against the full force of the HOA? Do you think your little road gives you power? Let me assure you, it doesn't. Alex's jaw clenched, the nerve of them. They were trying to undermine him, to make him doubt himself, but it wasn't going to work. You've made a mistake, Alex said slowly, each word deliberate. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are my neighbors. If you think I'll back down just because you sent a lawyer to threaten me, you're wrong. There was a brief pause on the line, followed by a dry chuckle. You're not the first person to think they can win against us, and you won't be the last. But you'll see soon enough how quickly we can destroy someone like you. Alex felt his pulse quicken, but he refused to let the fear creep in. I've got more to lose than you think, he said, his voice steady. You won't win this, not without a fight. Reynolds' tone darkened, no longer pretending to be cordial. You don't understand. This isn't just about a road. This is about your future, your neighbor's future. We're prepared to do whatever it takes to restore order. This is our community, and you, Mr. Evans, are not welcome here. The line went dead. Alex stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. His grip tightened, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the weight of the HOA's threat bearing down on him, but he wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. They thought they could control everything. But Alex wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing for the entire neighborhood. It was time to escalate the game. Determined, Alex reached for his computer and started drafting a new plan, one that would take the HOA by surprise. He needed leverage, something bigger than the road, something they couldn't ignore. His mind raced through every possible option, every potential advantage. And then it hit him. The public. The HOA thrived on secrecy, on maintaining control behind closed doors. But what if he could bring the fight into the light? What if he could rally the community, the people they'd been threatening, and expose the HOA for what they really were? The more Alex thought about it, the more the idea seemed perfect. The HOA couldn't control the narrative if the whole neighborhood knew what was at stake. With a deep breath, Alex began drafting a detailed letter, not just for the HOA, but for every homeowner in the neighborhood. It would be a declaration, a call to arms. He would expose the HOA's tactics, their intimidation, their power play, and he would do it in a way they could never ignore. But as his fingers hovered over the keyboard, a new thought crept into his mind. What if they already knew this was coming? What if the HOA had anticipated this exact move? They were no amateurs. This could turn into something far bigger than he had imagined. Alex's heart raced, but his resolve only strengthened. No matter what the HOA threw at him, he wasn't backing down. The game was changing, and Alex was ready to play for keeps. The next few days felt like an endless march toward an inevitable showdown. Alex could feel the tension thickening with every passing hour. His letter was ready, a well-crafted manifesto that would expose the HOA's manipulation and put the entire neighborhood on notice. He'd emailed it to every resident in the community, ensuring that everyone knew exactly what was happening. The reaction was swift. His inbox flooded with responses, many offering support, others expressing fear, but all of them felt like a declaration of unity against a common enemy. The HOA had underestimated them all. But Alex wasn't just relying on public pressure. He knew he needed one final piece to ensure the HOA couldn't easily shrug off his challenge. He needed the media. He spent the following morning coordinating with a local investigative journalist, someone with a reputation for exposing corruption and standing up to powerful organizations. The journalist, a woman named Maya Lawson, had been following HOA scandals for years, and Alex knew she'd see the potential in his story. With one call, Maya agreed to meet with him. That afternoon, they sat at a quiet cafe, their voices low but urgent. Alex handed her a stack of documents, the HOA's letters, the threats, his ownership papers for the road, and the letter he'd sent to the homeowners. Maya's eyes scanned them quickly, and Alex watched as her expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "This is big, Alex," Maya said quietly. "This could blow up in a way you're not prepared for. The HOA doesn't just control your neighborhood. They control a lot of other communities, and they don't take kindly to being exposed." Alex leaned forward, his voice steady but full of conviction. "I know, but if they think they can continue to bully us, they're wrong. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every person they've intimidated, every family they've trampled. It's time someone stood up." Maya nodded slowly, her fingers tapping thoughtfully on the table. "All right, I'll take this to my editor. But I'm telling you, this will get messy. Once the story hits, the HOA will come at you with everything they've got. You won't be able to hide from it. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Alex's gaze never wavered. "I've already made my move. I can't go back now." Maya gave him a sharp look. "Then get ready, because this is going to be war." As they parted ways, Alex felt the weight of the decision settling over him. The media storm was inevitable, and once it hit, it would expose the HOA's tactics to the world. The fight he had started would reach a point of no return. And yet, in the pit of his stomach, there was a surge of adrenaline. He had made his stand, and now there was no backing down. The next morning, the story broke. Maya's article was everywhere. Headlines screamed about a local homeowner standing up to a corrupt HOA, armed with the ownership of a critical road and a network of furious residents ready to fight back. The press coverage was immediate and widespread, and before long, news outlets from across the state were picking up the story. It didn't take long for the HOA to realize that the battle they thought they controlled had just slipped from their grasp. The HOA scrambled into damage control mode, sending press releases, trying to downplay their involvement. But the damage was done. The public pressure was mounting, and with every new article, every broadcast, more and more residents rallied behind Alex. The media had turned their focus from him to the HOA's corrupt practices. The tables had turned. Just when Alex thought he might finally get a moment to breathe, he received a call. It was from the HOA. But this time, there was something different in the voice on the other end. It was not a lawyer, not a threatening call from Reynolds. It was the HOA president herself. "Mr. Evans," she said, her voice clipped, professional. "We are prepared to drop the fine and resolve this issue amicably. But we need you to meet us in person to discuss terms." Alex's heart skipped. He had them. The fight was over. They had no more moves left to make. He smiled, but it wasn't out of satisfaction. It was out of sheer relief. "I'll meet you," Alex replied, his voice quiet but firm. "But this time, the terms are mine." As he hung up, the full weight of what he had done began to settle in. The battle wasn't over, but Alex had won the first round. The HOA had underestimated him, and now they would have to reckon with the full force of his resolve and the power of an entire community that had finally had enough. The road, the neighborhood, and the future of everyone in the community were no longer in their hands. They were in Alex's.